back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. I am joined by my usual Thursday cohort, JP Mason. How are you doing, JP?
Yeah, man, good. I kind of wish I was somewhere else at the moment, like possibly in another country. Not to be away from here or yourself, obviously, but yeah, I was very close last night.
You were thrown an opportunity last night that could have meant you would have only been graced with one screen today, and it would have been me. JP was offered the chance to go to this game. Talk us through it, JP, and why you decided to join me instead.
Well, my mate Michael, who I go to the games with and have been going to the games with since '97. You know, we've been away in European trips, and in fact, the anniversaries of which have been in the last few days. You know, things popping up. You know, reminding me of Copenhagen. You know, obviously just before lockdown, and prior to that, Valencia the year before. And we've always gone and like kind of spent a few days in the city, you know, and sort of got a bit of time there rather than just doing the in and out. But Michael came through to Glasgow last night and came to King Tut's where I was working a show, and so I was kind of sort of half working the show and half kind of entertaining Michael. And then as he got progressively more well-oiled on the dark fruits, he was like, you know, I've got a spare ticket, right? And I was like, I can't believe you have a spare ticket for this game. We've got 404 tickets and you've got a spare. And of course you have. You know, he's the type of guy that if Celtic were playing on the moon, he'd have a spare ticket, you know. And he was like, just come to the airport. All you need is your passport. And I was like, Michael. And he went, I'll square you up, you know, and you can just pay me back whenever. And I was like, now, how am I going to get on this plane, Michael? And he was like, well, I'll just phone the guy and I'll get you on and all that. I was like, it's not a number 61 bus, you know, like I'm pretty sure you can't just rock up. You're like, oh, any chance? But he was adamant, and I was swithering, but, you know, it's a lot of money to go somewhere for a day. I do like going on the away trips. I love them, but I like going for a few days and, you know, getting to experience the city. And I know from what I've seen so far of Bodo, there's not probably a lot to see other than snow and the inside of a bar. I heard from my friend James there that they're him and his pal Mikey are in a hotel drinking £10 pints right now in Norway. Wow. So, and also heard that it was £6 for a coffee and stuff like that. So, I mean, good luck to anybody there with their bank balance coming back.
Absolutely, JP. As I was saying to you before, mate, I mean, I love the idea of it, but like you say, if you had gone, maybe, were you a couple of pints down? No, you were working, so you had the sensible head on. Maybe if you were a wee bit more inebriated, you would have been at that airport.
I had a couple of pints after my shift, so that's when, you know, my guard started to drop a bit, and I started thinking about it being a realistic possibility, and I was just like, nah, this is madness. I mean, to be fair, I would have attempted to try and do this from Bodo if I'd made it there, because, you know, the flight was leaving at like 7 a.m, so probably would have got in at like, I don't know, 10 or something like that. So if I'd managed to find myself a quiet corner in an establishment, you couldn't have been speaking to me from there. But nah, I'll pass this time and hope for another round. Who knows what happens.
We will talk all about it, JP. It would have been interesting to dial you in from some airport or bar. Of course, there are a couple of ACSOM contributors at the game, and hopefully we'll get a few photographs from them and put it up on the socials as well. Just checking subs. Kelvin, have you got subs only commenting on the man has got it sorted. So it's all about Celtic fans' opinions in the comments. So please keep the comments coming in if you're watching on any of the platforms. If you're on YouTube, get yourself subscribing to the channel. There's loads of big guests and sessions and features coming up. We have the St Mary's feature very close to completion, so we went down there. JP spoke to Karen Tom White about the incredible fundraising endeavours of the Celtic support. It was brilliant to see him down there, and just the history of that place, you know, with the Gortamore memorial statue and the mosaic as you walk in, which inspired the ACSOM badge, and then the Wilfred portrait once you get in there. Brilliant. So we'll have that up ASAP as well.
did he say anything about like what was in immediate need of repair or anything like that? Because they've been deprived of cash.
They had a few like pressing issues. One of which was they couldn't even actually afford to switch on the radiator. So when you went into the chapel, it was frozen. So that's how skint they were. I mean, there's no way you're kind of trying to paint a different picture. They were also quite a bit in debt. And St. Alphonsus, which is the other chapel within the parish there, the roof is such that it can't actually be used at the moment. So there was repairs required there. But then the community work that they're doing as well, they've taken in 3 refugees, vulnerable, and they're basically housing them. So that needs to be financed and it needs to be supported as well. So loads of great work being done within the community and also within the chapel itself. So it was great to see them, and I'm really looking forward to putting that video out finally, JP, just to thank everybody for their support. You mentioned Norway, and it would be remiss of us not to mention some of the links that we've had. Some of the players or managers even that we have imported from Norway, and we've had, correct me if I've missed anybody here, Vidar Riseth, Harald Bratback, Thomas Ronja, remember him? Stefan Johansson, Chris Ayer, and of course, Ronny Deila. When you think about our Norwegian imports, who do you think back most fondly on? Because, of course, none of the names I've just mentioned are still at the club.
I mean, the much maligned Harald Bratback, I saw him play probably most of his games for Celtic, and he was an extremely frustrating striker, who definitely missed more opportunities than he scored. There was an anniversary recently of a game where he scored 4 in one game. And Lil Z on Twitter, who puts up the On This Day highlights, put them up, and I watched them back, and it included all his misses in that game as well. He should have scored at least 6. Henrik Larsson was laying them on a plate for him. But obviously you can't argue with somebody that scored 4 goals. But when you see the opportunities that he missed, but he did score that all important crucial goal. Which, I mean, if you're of a certain vintage, you'll remember that day that at 1-0 in that game, that was an absolute whitey. And I'm pretty sure George O'Boyle had an opportunity for St Johnstone to equalise. That goes in, history has changed, forever probably, or possibly. And Bratback's goal, put the tin lid on the title, and thank God it did. Again, I never got to celebrate properly that day. I was ill in bed, but I certainly celebrated as much as I could because, and Bratback's name's, etched in Celtic folklore now. So, I mean, you can't really go to utility player Vidar Riseth over Harald Bratback, or maybe even Ronny Deila. I did like Ronny Deila. I had a lot of time for him. I thought he was a great guy, and just maybe in at the wrong time at Celtic. We'll see how he does in the rest of his career. He's obviously done all right since he's left Celtic.
Yeah,
but yeah, Norway and Celtic do have a bit of a connection.
You mentioned there about Vidar Riseth. We've got the video where we demolished Rangers 5-1. The Moravchik game, as I refer to it as. He's on the front cover of that. So I do recall every time I hear Vidar Riseth's name, I do think about that game. He was part of that team, but so was Tony Warner. He was in goals for Celtic that day. Yeah. Thomas Ronja, there's a strange photo of me and Thomas Ronja outside the ground. 2000 and I don't know, 12 or 13 or something. Who knows where he's playing his football? I've not Googled that. I'm pretty sure I could find it easily enough. Stefan Johansson, quite liked him. Had a lot of energy. I thought we probably sold him a bit prematurely, to be honest, but I think he's at QPR now, and he's playing pretty well under.
The Fulham,
he left for Fulham, yeah. And of course, Ayer, I was a massive fan of Chris Ayer. Thought he was brilliant. Thought he would move on to big things. And he was one of Ronny Deila's protégés, as was Callum McGregor, who we'll be talking about at some point today, and Kieran Tierney, who's been in the news for a proposed move to Spain. So we'll be having a wee chat about that. So there's some of our Norwegian imports. The tagline or the strapline, what are Celtic's European aspirations? And do they match those of the fans? The reason I'm asking that, there was an interesting Twitter engagement between myself and Roger Mitchell online on the social media, looking at how we allow the standards to drop at Celtic GP, as fans, how we allow it, how we buy into this domestic goldfish bowl scenario. So I think it's a good discussion point, because this season is a wee bit different, I guess, from that, where we're prioritising, getting back on top, etc. And I think my biggest issue probably has been during the 9 in a row era, where there didn't really seem to be a European strategy. So we'll be talking about that and where we are now. Martin Davey is coming in on the YouTube. As I say, if you're watching on YouTube, get yourself subscribing on there. Loads of big content coming. Martin Davey says, good luck to the boys tonight. 2-0, then extra time, I hope. We'll get into what's going to happen tonight, JP, but the way I kind of look at tonight is, whether or not you agree with the Conference League, or the fact that you've already been knocked out of Europe twice this season, but you're still in Europe. You've basically got to play in the tournament that you're part of, and against the team that's in front of you. So I don't subscribe to this thing whereby we should be embarrassed to play in this competition. That's not our decision. These decisions are made, much higher than anybody at Celtic Football Club. Am I comfortable with us dropping out of 2 competitions and being in the third kind of tier? I think it could be done better. I think there probably could be an extension of the Champions League, where it is a league system throughout a calendar year, throughout a season, where clubs might drop up and down. I mean, I'm pretty sure it could be done better, but it doesn't seem to have captured the imagination of the Celtic fans. Where are you on the Conference League?
Well, I mean, you say that, but there was a lot of scaremongering last week about the attendance. I mean, there was a guy put up a screenshot saying, disgraceful from Celtic fans, where are all the fans that turn out for the big games, or the so-called big games? And then a guy replied and went, wait a minute, mate, you might have these big patches of seats that are available, but if you actually zoom in on them, there's only like maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 seats, dotted around in that section. So when it's zoomed right out, it looks like that whole section's available, but when you zoom in, there's actually only individual seats. And then lo and behold, you go into the ground last Thursday, pretty full. It was, £35 a ticket, a Thursday night, freezing cold. Mm-hmm. Not everybody's got a lot of money at the moment. Post, I'll not say post-pandemic, we're still kind of in it. So I don't really think you can say that people were kind of turning their nose up at it. I mean, the fans were there last Thursday. Unfortunately, the team didn't turn up as much as the fans. The team's given us a lot this season. I don't want to be too harsh, but there was a lot of players not at it last Thursday. With regards to the competition and the competition itself, not Bodo Glimt, but the competition, yeah, you're right. We can only play what we're put into, and our European strategy over the last few years has been, checkered at best. I mean, we've had moments of like amazing, success, like beating Lazio home and away. That happened, within the 9 in a row era, and but then there's obviously disastrous moments in that as well. The last season in particular was horrible. It was just absolute. Well, I mean, you say that. I mean, we got 2-0 up in the San Siro, and we just couldn't hold it together. We did really well against Lille away as well, but we were just absolutely humiliated by Sparta Prague home and away. But I know I saw the Twitter exchange, and I get that there has been a bit of blinkers about Celtic strategy in recent times and focusing just on domestic domination. But I would hope now that it kind of feels like it is a new era, because you've not got a Brendan Rodgers or a Neil Lennon, who are previously sort of tied to the club in a way. Ange Postecoglou's just come in and went, right, okay, I'm going to start from scratch here, and he has started from scratch. I know we've still got several players from previous management periods, but it's his sort of house to build now, and I guess we just have to go along. I mean, the fact that we made it into a European knockout competition, or the Europa League in the first place, for me was borderline miraculous. And the fact that we've got out of that group, having won away and at home against Ferencvaros, a team that put us out of the Champions League qualifiers, to get to this stage, even though it's not the stage we'd want to be at, it's still a pretty good achievement, I think. And whatever happens tonight happens. It's I've seen the pictures of what it looks like over there, and it's not ideal conditions. If players were kind of wincing at the cold Celtic Park conditions on Sunday against Dundee, then God help them tonight, because it looks pretty mental.
I've been reading around the concerns regarding the conditions, JP, and the artificial pitch, and that's the next thing we should talk about, I think. We've decided not to train on their pitch before the game. So sub-zero temperatures, minus 13 degree wind chill with the chance of snow tonight. But I mean, I look at that and it's a bit colder than we're used to, but surely, Celtic as a team are used to plastic pitches, for a start, because we have played on, a number of plastic pitches over the last few seasons domestically. And, like you say, it's no Betty Roses playing in Scottish football, is it? It's not as though we get loads of blazing sunshine and nice temperatures. Exactly. Will it play a part? Or do you think there's been a lot made of that?
I think the pitch itself is probably going to play a bigger part than the weather. I would have thought. I don't know. It just feels weird playing on a plastic pitch, and you go to places like Hamilton and like Kilmarnock and stuff like that, and it doesn't feel right. And I don't know if we play. It'd be interesting to speak to the players and get an honest answer from them how they feel about it. I mean, I don't know if anybody, any of the pressers has ever asked a player how do you feel about playing in a plastic pitch, because. You've given me my next question, mate. The next time I'm in one of these pressers, because I think that's I don't think that's been asked. Because I'd like to hear an honest answer, and you probably would get an honest answer if it was the fan pressers. I doubt
if it was Giakoumakis, you would.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. He's not shy of saying how he feels. But you know what? I'm fine with that. I know people were kind of like, "Oh no, we shouldn't say that." And it's like, well, we did just batter them 3-0. And he's full of confidence after scoring a hat trick that meant something. It wasn't just a throwaway hat trick in a 3 or a 4-0 victory. It was a 3-2 hat trick that all three of those goals were massively important on Sunday. So yeah, the guy's obviously flying, and really starting to sort of buy into the club and the whole sort of. Aura of being a Celtic striker, like Celtic strikers have been something that we've all loved throughout the years. Whether you go back to my first striker, the whole reason I support Celtic is because of a Celtic striker in Frank McAvenny, Scottish Cup final '88, and then the subsequent strikers after that. Going into sort of the 90s, like Cadete and Van Hooijdonk. I mean, those guys were like demigods to me when I was a wee guy. So. I could only imagine that if you're a wee guy now, Giakoumakis will be, heading towards that right now. You're a wee, 8-9-year-old kid, and you're seeing this guy score a hat trick. It's a big deal to us. So when you're a wee guy, that you're really more impressionable, and he's clearly loving the adulation, and it's cool to see somebody come in who's had a tough time and had his critics, and rightly so. But at the same time, you've got to allow somebody to sort of prove their worth, and he's starting to do that. And hopefully, the number 7 jersey's not going to weigh too heavy on him like it has on other strikers.
Quite a few. It's almost like poison chalice, some of these shirt numbers. And I think, see, when you're looking at the fact that he has turned it around, I guess. I mean, some people reckon that we were writing him off on a Celtic State of Mind. I was concerned at some of his performances. I thought that, early on, his first touch was poor. He was holding the ball up. He was winning free kicks, and I was asking, is that enough? And I appreciate that when you're holding the ball off and you're closing defenders down and you're creating pockets of space elsewhere, JP. But I was asking myself, is it enough? Because when you name some of the great strikers that you've already named, plus the great striker we've got at our club at the moment in Kyogo, and it's unfair to compare him specifically as a player, but the impact of both players was completely different. And there was a frustration that we were without a striker, really. Maedis came in and lessened that blow a wee bit. But we were in a situation against St Johnstone where we had to play Joey Dawson. That's how bad it was. When was that? That was Boxing Day, wasn't it?
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
went up to McDermott. So in Boxing Day, we're having to line up with Joey Dawson. And my kind of view of Giakoumakis wasn't based on his penalty miss against Livingston. It absolutely wasn't based on that. It was more of his all-round play. And then people thought I was having a go at him because I had a note of his involvement in the game, but I've got a note of every player's involvement, because when I watch it, if I don't take notes, I won't have much to talk about after the game, because my analysis, unless I'm writing it down, it's just as a fan. I'm just sitting watching it and enjoying it as a fan, JP. So I was delighted with his hat-trick. I think after the game, I'm going to pinpoint an interview that Aidan McGeady's given recently. I'm not sure when it was given, but he gave it to the Everton TV. And he was basically looking through his career, and he was talking about his time at Celtic and how almost by means of survival at that age, as a Celtic player, he had to have a bit of arrogance. And he explains it now, looking back, you can see that he was a bit arrogant, and he talks openly about it. He says, but you know what? I'm glad I did, because he needed a bit of arrogance to manage the scenario that he was in. Young guy, known by everybody, Goldfish Bowl of Glasgow, and he needed a bit of arrogance. So people are saying, well, that comes across as arrogant when Giakoumakis comes off the park and talks about winning the league, or believing that we can win the league. And I'm sorry, but I've never taken that as arrogance. And if it is, it's arrogance in a way that, you know what, we didn't have that self-belief last season, JP. I never seen a player coming out with that same kind of self-belief and fight and confidence. Maybe a wee bit of the old Glasgow Gallus, maybe not so much arrogance. So after the game, when I heard that he said it, and obviously that's a headline writer's dream, isn't it? When a striker comes out and says that, I didn't think too much of it, to be honest with you. And obviously, Amy and I spoke about it on Monday, and I was on that side of the fence, and Amy was like, keep it in-house, keep it within the dressing room. I'm okay with it. Got to be honest, I'm absolutely fine with that. No problem at all. What's your take on it?
I mean, like I say, I don't get too concerned about it. I mean, I didn't see it and immediately go, oh no, what's he said that for? That's a bit much or whatever. I kind of just thought it. I also thought, do you know what? He's not going to have said that without the say-so. I don't think he's gone rogue to say that. Like, that's probably been okayed. I very much doubt. A lot of people were saying, oh, Postecoglou will have grabbed him by the scruff of the neck when he comes out of that press conference and given him it tight. I very much doubt that. I mean, have you seen Ange Postecoglou's press conferences, or either at Celtic or in the past? I think Postecoglou would probably love it. Love the fact that his players have got that confidence and that he's instilled that confidence in them. Because he's made that point of saying that he doesn't really go in the dressing room much, and he just sort of lets the environment, sort of. Manifest itself, if that's the right word. I think he's quite confident about the type of people that he's brought to the club, the type of people that are already at the club, and you can see that he's filtering out the people that he wants to be there and not being there. And it was no surprise that Bolingoli is away. I mean, I'm sorry, but the thing that he did last season, some people might have managed to get over it and forget about it, but
that's arrogance. That's arrogance to believe that you can, to get away with that. What Giakoumakis has said is just self-belief.
Yeah, if Bolingoli had done that under Postecoglou, then hell mend them. And it's not as if Postecoglou's not going to come in and know what he did. I'm pretty sure he probably gave him an opportunity and has given him an opportunity to play as he did at Livingston and maybe in one other game. But somebody, I don't know if we spoke about this before, but somebody made a point of the fact that the press knew that Bolingoli had gone to Spain. They could have broke that story, but they allowed it to happen. They allowed Bolingoli to play in that game, despite knowing it, and then blew the story after he played in that game, thus affecting the whole COVID thing. And that led to the furore over the fact that he played and the sanctions and everything that were imposed. So I can't remember where I heard that or who said it, but I've definitely ingested that at some point recently. And somebody could prove me wrong or tell me wrong. Maybe we'd ask the main man, Tony Haggerty, if he's got any inside scoop on that. But that to me that's quite snide. Like to think that was done, deliberately. So it's almost like, oh, we've got something on him, but we'll hold it because
for maximum impact.
That picture of him on the plane that suddenly appears 2 days later after the game. It's a bit mysterious. But Bolingoli going away. I mean, with everything that's going on in that side of the world right now, I mean, that's the last place surely anybody would want to go. But he obviously wants to go and play football and resurrect his career, because his career's just stagnated at Celtic, since that incident. And yeah, so I mean, the people that are at Celtic right now are clearly, enjoying the environment and behaving themselves. You'd like to think, unless some story gets spilled tomorrow that totally scuppers any idea of that.
I hope none of them drive a blue Lamborghini. You were talking about plastic pitches, right? I do remember speaking. Can you remember when Dunfermline Athletic laid the artificial surface at East End Park?
Yeah, played that.
Did you?
We hired it out. Yeah, me and my mates that I played football with in Edinburgh hired it out one Sunday and played on the hallowed turf of East End Park. We didn't get to hear the Dunfermline song though, which was a pastiche of the EastEnders.
I know all about that.
Yeah.
You've taken me on a wee bit of a diversion here. However, I'm going to have to go down this road now that you brought it up, JP. So that song, the EastEnders pastiche that you refer to, it's probably on YouTube, because I remember seeing the video of all the guys, including the late Norrie McCarthy, singing along. That song was the brainchild of Blair Morgan, who was quite a famous football agent at the time. So he was, Duncan Ferguson's agent, the aforementioned George O'Boyle, Isfan Cosma, Duncan Ferguson, Andre Kanchelskis. And his daughter actually married John Potter, who played with Celtic and who's now, I believe, at Queen's Park. Good guy, John. So he was responsible for it, Blair Morgan, that particular song. But I thought you were going to mention Into the Valley by Skids. I thought you were going to mention that.
Yeah.
That was a bit later on, probably. Yeah.
I can't remember when the EastEnders one was, but I definitely remember being at a Celtic game away, and then hearing that and thinking it was absolutely hilarious. Blair Morgan was Mark Burchell's agent, if I remember rightly, as well, and maybe Keegan Parker as well, who was from my neck of the woods.
Wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. Yep.
Keegan Parker.
I remember him. Yeah, I remember Mark Burchell at that time was touted as Scotland's Michael Owen.
Yeah.
Now, this will actually bleed into the discussion we're going to have around Celtic as a European force, etc., as well, because part of that is in player development within the academy. What's the academy doing for us? But the Pars pitch, the reason I went on to the Pars, and you've played on the park, I've never played at East End, was I did speak to quite a few players who played on that artificial surface, and they said it was absolutely rotten. And there was a real increase in injuries around about the Dunfermline players at that time during the squad. But I think that particular type of AstroTurf was poor. The grading was pretty poor. It was almost like carpet tiles. And there were some images around about that time, JP, where some of the wee squares were lifting up, and you could actually see somebody going in for a tackle and the carpet tile lifting up. So I think we've probably advanced since then. Like
Hampden, when Rogic went and hit the penalty and the ground went up. I know that wasn't a plastic pitch, but I'm just thinking of the panels of a pitch getting lifted up, and then you zoom in on that shot when Rogic takes that penalty and the ball lifts off the ground because of when he plants his foot to take the shot, the ball goes up. I still can't believe that actually happened. That was ridiculous. I mean, I wonder if that square hadn't moved. Think about it. I wonder if that square hadn't moved and he'd scored that penalty and we'd beaten them in that game. What happens? What happens? Does Rodgers come? It's like that tiny wee thing.
Margins.
In time. By the way, also, not to go completely on a tangent, today is the anniversary of the last Brendan Rodgers Celtic game. Celtic 4, Motherwell 1, 24th of February 2019. 2 days later, he was announced as Leicester manager.
Wow.
And also, today was the day that Neil Lennon resigned in 2021, 24th of February 2021. Somebody retweeted the Celtic tweet from that day. So quite a strange strange fact that those two things happened on the same day.
And today's the day that Mark Hughes gets the job at Bradford. But again, that's another chapter. Right. We're going to talk about trusting the process, right? Because we were hearing all last season, keep the faith. Now, I love the terminology of keep the faith. Northern Soul, keep the faith. I've ran my race, all that kind of stuff. Love it. However, I thought it was almost like a go-to last season to just kind of like, there was almost a blind loyalty to Celtic until Lenny last season, where it was keep the faith, but we're rubbish. It's fallen apart around their ears. And keep the faith was the go-to. It was a mantra. But we've heard a lot about, trusting the process and keeping the faith this season. And we've seen the best of it. We've seen the best of Angie's philosophy and style as well. And I would maybe use the Rangers game as an example of that, JP, where everything seemed to come together. At 3-0, when you watch the game back, it could have been anything in that first half. And I just think we took the foot off the throttle in the second half. And, if we did have to pick it up, we could have done. We were flying that night. And I think we've seen the system coming up against real opposition and us grinding out results. Just for two examples, the two Dundee results at Celtic Park, Dundee United's last-minute goal, where I seen the amount of people waiting to watch our broadcast fall by about 500 when Abada scored that winner. And then the Dundee game, obviously at the weekend, we had to grind that result out. It was a tough day at the office and all this kind of stuff. We come up against Bodo Glimt, and I was looking forward to it because I was using examples of other teams we'd come up against, JP, that played kind of open, expansive football, and the fact that it suited Celtic because it allowed us to, we didn't have the two banks of defenders to break down. It was more open, and we could play this brand of football that Ange is introduced. It didn't quite go to plan. But what I'm keeping in terms of a positive is the fact that the way Celtic played against Bodo Glimt, we were nowhere near our best. So I don't think that, had we performed the way perhaps we performed against Rangers and in some other games this season, particularly in Europe, we're not getting tanked 3-1. Now, I'm taking that as a positive going into this game tonight because there's no way Celtic are going to be as bad as they were. Famous last words. There's no way we're going to, not implement our own playing style like we did last Thursday. And I believe that, it's a bit of a cliche, but the early goal is going to be massive. But I believe Celtic will score out there. I think we'll win the game. I'm not sure we'll win the tie. What's your view on that? The keeping the faith. Is it blind faith?
No, I think once you're given reason to believe, and Neil Lennon had given us reason to believe with things like Lazio away, Lazio at home, the victory at Ibrox, Johnny Hayes scoring. There'd been indicators from him that although there was a lot of kind of doubts over him being given the job full time in the showers or wherever he got it, there was enough there. There was enough there, for you to hang on to something. But as that started to erode with things like Sparta Prague 4-1 at home, Sparta Prague 4-1 away, I don't want to go on about the Rangers games last season because I do feel that there was mitigating circumstances around, certainly the first one anyway. The 2-0 where he basically said he had to throw a side together the night before with the players that he had available. And you've got Welsh coming in who's inexperienced, and it was a bit all over the place. But with Postecoglou, he's given you, although we had the bumps early on in the road, the bumps in the road being Livingston away, I was there that day and it was not pleasant. Hearts away, the first game of the season, that people just were getting to know each other's names at that point. But there was indicators in Europe with the Alkmaar game, even the Midtjylland game. There was indicators there that we were kind of about to go on the right path. So, despite Thursday's result last week, I did see a lot of negativity flying around online, which was definitely unwarranted. And as usual, people were going for individual players. And I think that's so unfair when you just see players getting targeted individually because the whole team didn't play well last Thursday. I think it's really unfair to go after, likes of Greg Taylor. Suddenly Greg Taylor's, damaged goods, get him out. He was brilliant against Rangers. Everybody was like having to eat humble pie on that front, you know. The people that, you know, had sort of spouted nonsense about him, and then they're having to go, well, I'll tell you what, best game in a Celtic jersey for Greg Taylor tonight. And then all of a sudden, doesn't he play well against Bodo? And everyone just ignores the fact that Jota didn't play well, Abada didn't play that well. You know,
O'Reilly, Rogic, yeah,
totally, yeah, and all these like the sort of more flashy names in the team didn't perform well either. Hence why we got beat 3-1. I think the third goal, so the guy next to me, I really can't stand it when people turn up that aren't the usual people around about you. I get really paranoid about that when like the usual people aren't next to me. Like Paul Docherty wasn't there last week. Mark wasn't there in front of me, and I gave him it tight on Sunday. I was like, you better not miss another game, like, because we won on Sunday. But there was a guy sitting next to me, and the stuff he was coming out with, especially like within 5 minutes, he called Starfelt, and I don't want to. I'm going to use the word. He called him a Mongo B, right? Used the word Mongo, and I really wanted to turn around and just go, man, that's not acceptable here, man. That, like, I don't know who you are, where you're from. I've never seen you before. You've got a ticket for this game, and you're sitting next to me, and you're using that language.
It's despicable.
I've got to sit next to this guy for another 85 minutes, potentially, you know, if he decides to stay for the full 90. So I didn't pull him up. And then the next thing, he's calling Maeda a baldy C and a fraud, and get him off. He's this, he's that. And then Maeda scores, and his mate made eye contact with me and sort of smiled, and I tapped him and I went, aye, fraud, aye. And he went, nah, he needs to score another two. He needs to score another two. He's still a fraud if he doesn't score another two. And I was just like, wow. Some people are, you know, beyond, you just cannot deal with people like that. But yeah, I mean, I think I turned to the guys behind me and I said, we need to score a goal here. And we got the goal. And then within a few minutes, they go up and get a deflection and get the third. And I don't want to think that the third's killed us, but it's certainly that's put a massive dent in our chances of getting through tonight. I think if it was 2-1, I might have made that flight this morning. But no, we've still got a chance. Of course, we've still got a chance. We've seen our away performances. Betis, Leverkusen would give you enough food for thought to think that we can go over there and do something tonight. The flip of that is that we got hammered 4-0 at home off Leverkusen, but anybody that remembers that game will remember that game could have been any score that day, because we played all right, actually, but still managed to be on the end of a 4-0 cuffing. But yeah, I don't know. It's Celtic in Europe. Who knows? We've seen the film many times before, and who knows what film we're going to watch tonight. But it should be an exciting one, I think. I don't think that they are home and hosed just yet.
See, when you think about I'm going to get onto this, some of the discussions that I've seen online since last week's game around the selection and playing a weekend side. I want to talk about that a wee bit as well, JP. But that story you've just told me there, where you're in this stadium, which means so much. I mean, we talk about a Celtic state of mind and the community aspect of being in amongst people that you regard as being of a similar or the same state of mind, be that politically or in terms of your charitable ethos. And I've always felt that there's a huge amount of kind of culture in and around, and I mean culture in terms of the arts and theatre and movies and music. And the Celtic support are my type of people, you know, and I've always felt that. I've always felt when I'm at a Celtic game that you are shoulder to shoulder with people that are like-minded. And, you know, that term Celtic-minded came up a long time ago, and a wee ton of that phrase on a Celtic state of mind. But when you tell the story that you've just told there, I find it despicable that and listen, he's a Celtic fan, I'm guessing, because he's at the game cheering on Celtic. But I just can't regard somebody like that as being anywhere near the same kind of ilk as the many great people that I know that support Celtic. I mean, that kind of language is despicable. And it puts you in a position, though, you know, as innocent bystander who is just there hearing this absolute trash coming out of his mouth, because you're then given that scenario. What do? Do you pull him up? Because if you don't know he's an unknown quantity to you, JP. You don't know who the guy is. No. But I just think it's despicable. But it puts you in a position whereby you know that you want to pull him up because you're offended by what he said. But then the heat goes on you because he's an unknown quantity. It's a difficult one for a lot of people at the football. I've seen and heard people being shouted down before, and long may that continue. But yeah, absolutely. Get your normal comrades back in their seats.
He didn't shout it. He just sort of said it, like a speaking volume. He didn't like bellow it, but he said it loud enough for me to hear because I was sitting next to him, and I was just like, wow, that's so
it's horrific. Yeah. Mr. Whip says it right. Anyone targeting anyone with a disability or anyone in a minority is, you go right back though, talking about minorities, right? You go right back to the formation of the club. We've been talking about St. Mary's earlier. The formation of the club, the actual statue in the grounds of St. Mary's talking about Angkor Timor, and you think to yourself, why was Celtic even founded? Because 40 years after the Great Hunger, the Irish were still being treated as second-class citizens, unemployable, uneducated. They weren't given opportunities. Let's set up a football club and let's feed, the poverty-stricken kids who have come over from Ireland within the parishes, within the 3 parishes. And for Celtic fan, that for me is exactly what, and if you know the history, it means. You've got to know the roots of the club, and it actually follows you in life, doesn't it? Because you would never allow anyone to be marginalised like that. I mean, that's pathetic, whoever that is, that individual that you mentioned.
Yeah, I hope I don't see them again. I mean, I did. The guy that sits next to me normally was back in his seat on Sunday. I said to him when he arrived, I went, here, those guys that were here at the Bodo Glimt game haven't got anything to do with you, have they? Because, it could have been that it was his friends or something that he'd given the tickets to, and he went, "Oh no," he says, he was like, he basically said I couldn't afford to come. He was quite honest with me. He was like, I couldn't afford the extra cost, and I was like, fair play. So he said, no, that whoever was here, nothing to do with me, and I told him, and he was absolutely appalled that somebody had sat in his seat that he sits in for all the home games and had used that sort of language. He was raging actually.
Well, they're representing Celtic. I always remember speaking to, again, this is a klaxon because I'm going to have to do a big name drop here, but I was speaking to Sean Fallon about representing Celtic. It was so important to Sean Fallon and how Celtic were represented, and he did speak about the fact that every time you're wearing a Celtic jersey, you're representing the club. Doesn't matter where you are, but whatever you do and you behave, you'll be Celtic fan. Enter here, does enter here. It could be anything, but you've got a Celtic top on, and and I think when they're sitting on your seat, you might almost feel as though they're representing you as well, because, like you say, it could have been you've got a ticket, you've given it to somebody they're sitting in your seat and they're behaving like that. No, but it's so disappointing because you do feel that there's a shared mentality and ethos. I think there is, generally. I think there's a minority, JP, guys like that.
There's no way that you're telling me that his language is something that you would hear from. You could go along the row for another, like right round for another 500-600 people and not find somebody else that would use that that sort of language. So, I mean, I'm well aware that it is a minority, but it was really disappointing to hear. And I've heard stuff when I've been on away trips and things like that. And I have actually said to somebody, by the way, you're wearing a Celtic strip, you're representing the club. And people here, have known, from yesterday didn't know who Celtic are. Today they do know who Celtic are, and you're the image that they will remember, and what they hear from you will be the image that they remember. And you want it to be a positive one, and overwhelmingly positive it has been in all the trips that I've been on. I very rarely seen any bother. Amsterdam away, there was a bit of bother with some fans throwing some stuff at us as we went into the stadium, but in the actual middle of the city and everything, I didn't have any bother. This is the 2001 one I'm talking about, by the way, not the infamous one where they sort of turned up in plain clothes or just I think it was like a kind of ambush sort of thing where it had all been arranged and they were all just in amongst the Celtic fans, and then at the stroke of a watch they just all jumped the Celtic fans. That's how I've been told it happened. But yeah, you don't want the club being misrepresented anywhere.
No.
Scotland, Europe, for mainland Europe. You just want people to have a good impression of the club.
Oh, definitely. And there's a few comments coming through, actually, JP, where people had similar experiences at the game. Martin Kay had a similar experience last week at the Bodo game. So very unfortunate indeed. But I'm going to talk about resting players. It's been a topic of conversation for a wee while, actually, because Jim Orr is a great believer in last season and this season put Europe on the back burner. I find that hard to accept as a Celtic fan. Now, I didn't grow up in the golden era of Celtic in Europe. It's not as though I had that experience myself. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, we had very little to shout about on a European kind of front. It was the stories and the tales of the 60s and 70s that we were still being fed for the first 20 years in my life, certainly, JP. And then the reputation in Europe started to be rebuilt under Martin O'Neill. So I don't have this kind of like expectancy because I grew up with Celtic playing in the latter stages of Europe. But I go into every single season, we're talking about aspirations, expectations, your ambitions as a Celtic fan. And I go into every season hoping to be in Europe after Christmas. That's always what I hope to be the case. However, if we're to get knocked out tonight, JP, I would still feel as though it's been a bit of a failure of a European campaign. Now, I don't know if that's because we've been knocked out a couple of competitions on the way. I'm not sure if that's the reason why it would feel that way. Or maybe going into the game against Bodo Glimt, I didn't expect to win the game, but I certainly felt would have put a better representation of ourselves against Bodo Glimt last week on the park. So going into the game tonight, I know what Jim Orr's response to this would be. He would play a weakened team. I don't think Ange Postecoglou thinks in that same vein, and I certainly don't. I think you've got to be careful. We've got a big game on Sunday. I get that, and I don't think we'll play what would be the strongest 11. I think there will be some changes, but I think largely it's going to be a very strong side that Celtic put out tonight. How would you play it?
I mean, there's no way he's putting out a weakened team. I don't know the squad that's travelled, but I mean, it's certainly not going to be a youth team that he puts out, or peppered with an Owen Moffat or a Dane Murray or anybody like that. It'll be a first team Celtic that go out tonight. And I saw we got slagged last week for getting beat off a team with or a club by a club that doesn't have a strong European stature. But I mean, they absolutely dismantled Roma 6-1 at home. And that's definitely not something that you can just sort of go, oh well, that was just a one-off. If everybody's bumping their gums about Rangers winning in Dortmund, then that's a standalone result. If that game was played again, would the scoreline be the same? Probably not. If the Roma Bodo Glimt game was played again, would they win 6-1? Maybe not. It's not. Sometimes smaller teams can have a big result. In a European competition, it's just every game is unique. And a decision goes your way, a penalty, a VAR, whatever decision that can totally swing the dynamic of a game in your favour, and you get a goal like they did, and then get a second goal straight away. Then it's sort of dreamland stuff. And we were 2-0 up at the San Siro. We just didn't know how to handle the game after that, and obviously couldn't cope with the onslaught from Milan. But Bodo Glimt, if I had been on here last Thursday, I would have probably been saying the fact that they haven't played, and it's their pre-season is surely something that would play into our hands. That would still come. I mean, there's no way I was going into last week's game thinking, 2-3-0 tonight, it should be fine now. Like, absolutely no way, because you're aware of what they've done, and you're aware that they're a decent outfit. And, we've also seen Celtic in Europe so many times, so you'd never go into any European game really thinking we're going to destroy them or anything like that. But I think tonight, somebody mentioned earlier on about 2-0 and going to extra time. I think if we can keep a clean sheet and get to 2-0, hopefully our fitness would tell if it did go to extra time, because I don't really think that they have maybe the fitness levels to keep going, at this stage, because they've not got loads of games under their belt. Simple fact. It's not as if they're, going to be on the same level as us in terms of their fitness. So that's how I would see it tonight. But with regards to a weakened team, absolutely no way. Like it's got to be all guns blazing tonight.
See, I look at last week, and I've said about Jim's kind of attitude against playing the strongest side in Europe, but I also take a lot from the way that Jim looks at scenarios and defeats and outcomes and the margins, JP. And I've mentioned a few times that I look at that game and we were miles off what we would expect from Celtic. We weren't great on the night, but we've got a deflected goal against us, and there's 2 occasions where, barring marginal offside decisions, their goalie's getting a red card and we're getting penalties. So, we might have come away with a 2-2. You just, fine margins. And I think that we definitely have a goal in us, like we say, and I'll keep talking while JP deals with that. We definitely have a goal in us, and I'm going to actually read out the team that I would play, and I want to know everyone who's tuning in if you agree or disagree with this. This is almost like a hybrid of resting a few of the players, but for 2 reasons, JP. Resting the players so that we've got a strong bench should it be required, maybe 30 minutes before the end of the game, but also with the league game in mind. So there might be a slight contradiction in this, but the team I would start with tonight would be Hart, and please give me a shout if I've mentioned anyone who have had last-minute injuries or aren't registered in the European squad, and I've made a total hash of this. Hart, Ralston, Taylor, and I put an asterisk there because I want to come back to Taylor, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Starfelt. That's the goalkeeper in defence. In the midfield, I'd play Hatate, McGregor and O'Reilly. And up front, it's Maeda on the left, Giakoumakis and Forrest on the right. So you can see that there are certain areas of that park that maybe your first choice aren't being selected. So I'm resting Juranovic, Jota, Abada and Rogic with the view, as I say, that we could be 1 or 2 up, I hope. And then you've got a strong bench to go into extra time or maybe to get that decisive goal near the end, JP. But also, we've got Hibs at Easter Road on Sunday, and you've got to keep one eye on that. And I've asterisked Taylor because of the stick he came in for against Bodo Glimt last week. The question was, and I think we spoke about it on here, is European football a step too far for Greg Taylor? Well, no, there's only one way to find out. Go and play against your opposite number who definitely got the better of him last week. But how's he going to learn, JP, if you just drop him? So he's got to learn, he's got to analyse that performance, and obviously data analysis is huge at all top clubs. So you would expect him to have looked at that with the team who deal with the data, the video analysis, and go up against your opposite number again and do better. And that's the way I would deal with it, as simple as that sounds. But that's my starting lineup. Is that a wee bit weaker than you would expect?
No, I don't know why, and I'm not basing this just on his performance when he came on at the week. Did Beaton come on at the weekend? He did, didn't he? Came on in the second half against Dundee.
He did, aye.
Aye. I would be inclined to play Beaton tonight, and I never ever thought I would say that. Well, there you go. Someone else is saying that.
Jason Lee agrees with you.
I wonder if it is the Jason Lee of American film fame.
Was he in My Name is Earl?
Yeah. I quite like Jason Lee, actually. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know why. I think Beaton would. He's got experience. Hopefully, not the experience of poking somebody in the forehead, but I just think potentially that is a good idea to play him instead of O'Reilly. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a football manager, but I wouldn't be disappointed if Nir Beaton started tonight, put it that way. And I never thought I would say that. And it speaks volumes of the player himself and of Postecoglou's management that I would be okay with that and quite happy with that if that happened. As for Forrest starting, Michael and me were talking about this last night. midway through his attempts to get me to go to Norway with him. And he was, he was saying I'd start Forrest in this game. He's got big game experience. He's done the business before. He's got the composure. He's scored big goals away from home in Europe. He's got a point to prove as well. That can, this type of game, if James Forrest was to play in this game and do well, it would win a lot of people's hearts and minds back who have kind of written him off. And the same, like you say, with Greg Taylor, like Greg Taylor's obviously been made a kind of whipping boy for last Thursday, and maybe Ange Postecoglou rested him on Sunday with an eye on this game. But, I've got no doubt at all that Greg Taylor can put in a shift and hopefully answer some critics. But the rest of the team that you named there, I would certainly go with. I think although Juranovic has been brilliant at right back, I think Ralston showed on Sunday that his delivery into the box is really, really good, and he was putting balls like that in, 3 or 4 of them before the eventual goal came for Giakoumakis. So because there was balls going, the guy two seats along from me was losing his mind at the fact that these balls were going into the box and nobody was biting, nobody was gambling on them, and then finally Giakoumakis did, and what a header to score his third goal. I mean, a left foot, right foot header. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen. I think maybe Dembele was the last Celtic player to score a hat-trick.
The perfect hat-trick. And Declan was saying on Tuesday, JP, he posed the question, who was the last number 7 to score a hat-trick for Celtic, and it was Robbie Keane. And I was thinking to myself, has there been one since Henrik Larsson? But yeah, Robbie Keane was the man. I've seen a few names getting thrown into the mix. I remember we had a dead rubber against Cluj away from home, and Neil Lennon played Scott Robertson, you'll remember, who's out on loan at the moment, and Karamoko Dembele, who at the time was 16. Dembele's now 19. And he's not really in our thoughts, is he? I've seen a lot of people mention Doak. Ben Doak came in, played a few substitute appearances. I don't think we're at that stage where you're throwing in guys with very little. I mean, Dembele's been in and around the team for a while, but he's got very little in terms of first team experience, isn't he? I wouldn't be throwing guys like that into the mix tonight. I still think there's something to play for tonight. Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm all for giving players experience and things like that, but I mean, this is a winnable game, people might think because we're 3-1 down that we've got absolutely no chance. But I think especially what Callum McGregor said after the game, he said, I saw enough and I saw enough of them and us tonight against each other to know that we're not out of this tie and we can do something in the game over there. Conditions will play a part, of course they will, but I've got confidence in us at least giving them a game. I don't think if we score the first goal, it's absolutely game on. But the thing is, we've just got to keep it tight at the back, and we can't allow. We've shipped quite a few goals recently. 2 at Aberdeen, 2 on Sunday against Dundee, which was nobody would have thought we would have shipped 2 goals to Dundee, and we shipped 3 last week to them. So it's getting. We have kind of, our defence has been really good all season, despite getting pelters in the media, Starfelt, whipping boy, all the rest of it. But we've got the best defensive record in the league, and there's a reason for that. We just have to really tighten it up again. We can't allow the sort of defensive errors and not being strong enough. That second goal against Dundee was just, you could totally see it coming. It was telegraphed. It was a really, really good ball from Niall McGinn. But everybody you could feel an uneasiness around the stadium when that free kick was given, because you were like, if they put a decent ball in here, there's a good chance they're going to score, and we shouldn't be that vulnerable from set pieces like that, I don't think. So that's a key thing tonight, and I think Hart has to be a bit more switched on as well. He's been a little bit lackadaisical recently, a bit passive. The thing is, you cut it out at source. Now, again, it's not an opportunity for me to have a dig at Starfelt, but he gave away both free kicks on Sunday, JP, that that resulted in both Dundee goals. So if you cut that out at source, then we should be dealing with the balls into the box better, but we don't have the ball going into the box if you don't give away the free kick. And I'm looking at some of the points coming through. Jason Lee comes back in. Is Liam Scales just not ready yet? And I think that this is an interesting one because this drops into the conversation we've been having in and out of the podcast today, the broadcast rather, about Celtic's European aspirations. Right? So Robert Hyland comes in, upgrades to Taylor and Starfelt required in the summer. Right. I totally get what you're saying here, Robert, because Starfelt, for me, he wasn't cheap, £4.5 million. So we paid the same for Kyogo. He wasn't cheap. He's come in as a Swedish internationalist. Is the jury still out on him? I don't think that he's on the same kind of level of quality as, if you look at our defence, as, let's say, Juranovic or Cameron Carter-Vickers. Mm-hmm. So could we do better? Well, do we have better? Is Julian better? I don't know yet. We don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back, JP. But if not, if Julian isn't, then I agree, yes, we could go out and our acquisition of a centre-half, I think, would be a priority. Similarly with Taylor, I've kind of stood up for Taylor there, and I'm thinking, how do you develop Taylor as a player? Well, put him up against the same guy, make sure he doesn't get skinned and turned inside out tonight. If he proves that he can't step up to that kind of point, then you've got to have an upgrade. You've got to have as strong a left-back scenario as we do on the right-hand side. And by the way, Juranovic is your first choice right back every day of the week. I love Ralston to bits, but he's your backup. And if we had the similar scenario on the left, JP, then you're looking at that team and you're thinking, right, we kind of mean business. Will we do it? This is the big question. And this goes back to what is the club's aspirations? Because you'd need to push the boat out to get we're not going to get another Juranovic-style player for 2.7 million. That's an incredible bit of business. But if you're to get that level at left-back and that level at centre-half, for they two positions that Robert's highlighted, bearing in mind we've still got to sign Cameron Carter-Vickers and Jota. So we're talking about a huge amount of investment. If the club do that, then I think you're the real deal going into the qualifiers, if there are qualifiers, or you're going into the Champions League campaign in really good shape, next season. And that's been the biggest issue for me. We've always gone in unprepared, and it's normally been for qualifiers, Jake. We've just not been prepared. And then we get knocked out by teams that we sometimes even proved later on in the season we're better than, because we've met them in other competitions later on and we've beaten them. So I think the point Robert makes is a very good point. If we really were to push the boat out and get that level of left-back, centre-half, and do deals for Cameron Carter-Vickers and Jota, that's a team to be reckoned with. I'm not saying we're going to win anything in Europe, but at least we'll put a good account of ourselves over. The big question for me is, do the club share that ambition?
Well, I mean, if Postecoglou wants something, I think, this is just my thoughts, but I think that the club will entertain whatever that is, because it seems to be that's how the way things have gone so far, in terms of, I want these three guys to come in from Japan. I want them to be ready for the start of the transfer window, to come in, hit the ground running, have trained through that winter break, and contribute straight away. We can certainly make a point about a couple of players elsewhere who haven't really contributed elsewhere, whereas we've got guys who've got several games under their belt now and are integrated into the team as first team players. Hatate comes in straight away as a first team player. O'Reilly comes in straight away as a first team player. Edukuchi's been unfortunate with injury. Maeda, first team player. These guys haven't just come and then sat in their tracksuits and we've wondered what they'll be like. They've just come straight in and started playing in the first team, because we needed it. Because, like you said, we were playing Joey Dawson when Kyogo went off injured at McDermott Park. So these guys have come in, and that's on his say so. So if he turns round to Michael Nicholson, Banky, or whoever, and says, right, I want a left back, and I want this guy, and it costs $5.5 million or whatever, to go and get him. Simple as that. I don't think we're really we cannot be in a position to have a guy who is idolised by the support as much as Postecoglou is right now, and continues to be. We can't have a position where he's, throwing words into his post-match pressers like Terminado and things like that. We we can't have that happen.
No,
we've got to keep this guy happy because he's delivered so far. We've got one cup in the cabinet, and we're aiming for another 2. So, it's as simple as that. We've got to match the manager's ambition because he's delivered enough so far to show that he's worth matching the ambition. It's not. There's no way this guy's a fraud. The guy, he's absolutely done the business, and there's people I know that didn't think we would be anywhere near where we are right now, and I'm talking about Celtic fans, older than me and have seen things more than I have, and they're having to not eat humble pie, but they're kind of a bit blown away by what we've done so far, and we're in a strong position. And we've always complained in the past about not building on positions of when we've been in a position of strength, we haven't capitalised on it, i.e. Martin O'Neill post Seville, and potentially, definitely Brendan Rodgers as well, because all these players that he earmarked have gone on to do pretty well, guys that he wanted in at Celtic, be it Castagna or there are others, many.
No, I agree with that. I think that it comes to that point that there was the famous or infamous conversation that Martin O'Neill had on the plane coming back from a 3-0 scalping against Shakhtar Donetsk, where he mapped out what he wanted for the following season, and I think it probably would have cost the club in the region of 20 million quid plus wages, and the club were like, that's not going to happen. But we're not going to take that next step, and I think that we're probably £20 million 20 years ago was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money to Celtic now, because if you're thinking Carter Vickers, Jota, you're probably looking at between 12 and 14 million quid in transfer fees for those two players. And if you're going to try and get an upgrade on Starfelt and Taylor, as Robert suggested, what are you talking, £5 million each? So you are talking that kind of figure. Are the club willing to do that? We're in financial health, good financial health. One last thing to consider, JP, before we go and enjoy the lead up to the game tonight. In the news this week, we've had a couple of left backs. In the news, Tierney has been the subject. Kieran Tierney has been the subject of a potential £50 million move to either Real Madrid or Barcelona, depending on which reports you read. I think we've got a sell on. I hope we've got a good sell on Tierney. And in the same week, Bolingoli is loaned out to the Russian Premier League. Bolingoli, in essence, was people going about Taylor being the replacement for Tierney. But you look at the chronology of that as well, and the timeline of that rather. We bring in Bolingoli. I think he cost us about £3.5 million, £3 million, right? And you've seen what kind of level of quality or not he has been. Is that indicative of our lack of ambition? We've gone from a player like Tierney, who we knew he was going to go into greater and bigger and better things, that we discussed it on ACSOM after they left. A player like Tierney getting spoke about in the £50 million bracket, and the one we've kind of brought in is Bolingoli, who we can't get rid of quickly enough because we basically bought someone who was substandard. And listen, had he behaved differently, we might have been talking differently about him. JP, I totally get that. But if we're talking quality and the gap between Tierney and Bolingoli, that's how far we dropped in that one position. We've since brought in various other left backs who are nowhere near Tierney either. But is that indicative of how our ambition has been minimised over the last few years?
I think it's indicative of how poor our recruitment's been. I think potentially whoever signed Bolingoli, whoever put their signature on that contract, genuinely thought that Bolingoli was going to come in and do a good job and be a week in, week out player for Celtic for the next 2 or 3 seasons. That's the problem, is that whoever was signing those contracts and signing, Albion Ayeti, Barkas, Bolingoli. I think the Shane Duffy thing, I think that was an anomaly in that, the guy's playing Premiership football now and maybe just was the wrong guy in the wrong film last season. I think if Shane Duffy was to come back to Celtic, that's not going to happen. But if he was to come back to Celtic, I think you would see a different Shane Duffy in this environment that we're in now, and certainly in the dressing room environment as well. But Kieran Tierney, I mean, I watched him every week. He was a once in a generation player, and you just knew that he was going to go on to bigger things. If bigger things is Barcelona or Real Madrid, then that's dream stuff for him, I would have thought. You know, what players in our lifetime have gone on, apart from Larson, obviously, but what players, Scottish players, have gone on to play for Real Madrid or Barcelona? Not many. I really hope it's Barca over Madrid, you know, just for obvious reasons.
So do I, JP. I'm thinking Steve Archibald. Stevie Archibald, right? Who was the kid that played for Real Madrid? It wasn't Cameron Harper. He was the one that played for Celtic. Mm-hmm. There was a Scottish kid out there for some reason. I don't think he played first team.
Aye. I can't remember his name, but yeah, he was like in the reserves or whatever. I don't think he ever got a first team game. But see, if you're talking 50 million for Tierney, that just shows you that the market is not what it was, you know, 2 years ago. Because there's no way Kieran Tierney is 50 million. You're saying that he's only worth double what they paid for him.
What I like about it, JP, is that no longer will Ollie Burke be the most expensive Scottish footballer in the history of football. Because at the moment, that is the case. If you accumulate all his transfer fees.
He was one of the goal scorers in that game 3 years ago today, 24th of February 2019. The scorers were, I think it was Sinclair, Eddie got 2, and Burke. This was the fourth goal scorer.
You know, he's still only about 24 years of age, Ollie Burke. Still a young guy, born in Kirkcaldy, incidentally.
A very wealthy man, no doubt.
I bet he is, absolutely. Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been 2 weeks since I spoke to you, JP, so it's been brilliant to get you back on the show. Enjoy the game, wherever you watch it tonight, JP, and everybody else who's tuned in on the socials and also on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, keep in mind you get on there and subscribe. Also, download the app, Who Knows Wins. Underneath here, you're going to be faced with some ACSOM contributors in there. There's a wee kind of top 10 picks league that we are going to be telling you loads more about. We might actually have a weekly show based on that on a Friday night. So look forward to that as well. If you are on YouTube, make sure you subscribe because we've got some big videos. The St. Mary's one's the next one up. It's going to be tremendous. Loads of sessions as well.
I'll be through on Saturday as well for a we're allowed to say what it is.
Yes, you can. You will be teaming up with Paul Sheridan of the Wakes, but not for a session, but for something that's slightly different. It's sell the jerseys.
Yeah, looking forward to being on Paul's show. I've known Paul a long time, actually, through Scott Hutchison of Frightened Rabbit. Paul and Scott were friends at art school. So I've known Paul and known of Paul for a long time, and he's a good guy, and we're both mad Celtic fans, mad St. Pauli fans. I look forward to talking about football strips with Paul.
Love it.
Some people will be like, turn them off. I remember comments when we start talking about strips and people are like, oh God, what are they talking about football strips for? And it's just like, well, you know, it's part of our culture, part of our... You know, so
and it's great. The nostalgia thing's brilliant. Paul, as well as being a tremendous musician, a really, really sound guy, he's a great artist. He's one of these guys who seems to be just good at loads of different things, JP. So I'm looking forward to that on Saturday. We'll pull that together, and that will be out on the channel as well. So get subscribing. There's loads of great, content on there. Absolutely studs. Lanigan, the Wakes. Yeah, get them on if you haven't listened to the Wakes. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.